Call to order the
10:08.
February meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. Roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Finkel,
Here.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
David Bergstrasser.
Here.
Anthony Netto.
Here.
Jeffrey Rosenthal, excused.
Excused.
Robert Moore.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hodgson.
Here.
Stephanie Rizicki. Richard Ferrari here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I need a motion to revise the meeting agenda to take in 2 additional contracts and to allow for an executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss personnel matters
And the union contract.
and the union contract. I'd like to make that motion.
Mr. Hayes.
I'll second it.
Mr. Bergstrasser.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have there's no guests here and no one here for public comment, so we can go right to approval of the December 8th, 2015 regular board meeting minutes. Motion to accept?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes.
Second?
Mr. Netto.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Report of the acting executive director. Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on page 28, or excuse me, 26. 6 looks like an 8. Aside from what I have on my report, during this past month, staff has focused on completion of the Environmental Facilities Corporation application for the funding of the capital project at the Conkerville Dam. I believe that application is probably 95% complete, if I were to pick a percentage, and I submitted that report, that application as a draft to EFC yesterday morning. I got confirmation of its receipt by the folks at EFC. They will review it. They have a fairly large team to look at it, and then they will get back to us in terms of what we may have omitted or have to embellish or what have you. Also spent a lot of time looking at the Black River reapportionment, if you will. The first step in that, and the first order of business, is the mapping, the GIS mapping of the rivers in the Black River area. That work, the thought would be done in-house by staff. We went down that road. We looked at basically using the same procedure that we used when we mapped the Hudson River area some time ago. A couple of issues, different mapping basis this time around, maybe a little more involved, but the key issue that we needed to address was the change in the ArcGIS software that would be utilizing to put that ultimate map together, and that thing has turned out to be somewhat of a bear. It's new. The person who is most familiar with it is more familiar with the older version, so we reached out to what at the time we would consider an alternate source, and that is
Clark Davis. Clark,
yeah, get their name right. It's kind of a long name. Ryan Biggs, Clark Davis. It's an MWBE company that we currently have a contract with to do surveying around the lake, where we're having them look at mid areas. We reached out to them to see if they had an expertise in GIS. They do. They submitted us an initial proposal. What they proposed to do covered most of what we needed done. There was a couple areas along the rivers that they had included. We requested that they include that, and then they came back to us with this proposal that's before the board that we will look at during contracts. And I guess we can get into it in more detail then, but my recommendation is that we definitely go down the road of using an expert versus how we might struggle in-house doing the same work. So aside from those two areas, I've been doing my CFO thing, and beyond that, my report is there for the board, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, what's this Tucker Strategies, or at least, and still are?
That, Tucker Strategies, he's actually a consultant. The reservoir operating agreement up at Stillwater
Okay, so
is going to expire December 2006, December 31st, I believe.
So that's for the hydro?
Correct.
Okay.
So that was, so to meet the requirement that we begin negotiating, I guess, is it a year? Was it 2 years? That we negotiate 2 years before the expiration of that agreement, we had them come in. Beyond that, we didn't really get into terms and
I
conditions.
just never heard the term Tucker Strategies.
Say again?
I never heard the term Tucker Strategies before.
It's Mercer.
Is it?
Right, it's Mercer, correct.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much. We move right to contracts. We have 5 to discuss, 3 listed and 2 additional. First one is resolution to approve Second Amendment to Audit Services Agreement. Again, Mr. Ferrara.
Mr. Chairman, that contract, my memo is on page 27. Resolution's on 28, and the contract is on 29 and 30. My memo says, as we discussed last month, that it was at the Audit Committee meeting in December. We spoke about KBL and some of the other additional work that they needed to do in connection with both the consolidated statements for June 30th, 14, and 15. And I get into specifically the November 13th GASB, Government and County Standard Board's Statement 71, which addresses amounts that are contributed from state or local government employers or employer contributing, having to do with the defined pension plan. It was a very involved, I read through it, and actually I probably read it early 2014. As a layperson, as far as these reports go, I really didn't see at the time a lot there. I was wrong. There was a ton of information that needed to be gathered and compiled. The timing of it was also interesting because at the initial report, they all deal with what your fiscal year ending date is. And in the state, we are probably an anomaly with our July beginning and June ending date. So that made it one of the first ones that GASB 71 needed to address. Thus, so we engaged KBL to complete that, which required doing a restatement for 14. They completed our statement, all unqualified, for 2015. So again, because of the significant work that they had to do, I looked at the amount that, in terms of their hours, we were probably looking more at 12 to 15,000. He agreed to bill us 7,500. I accepted that. So I have that before the board.
So the motion is to add $7,500 to the contract.
Correct, and it's a one-time fee. It's not, I mean, there will always be other GASB items, but, you know, this one was a significant report to go through and to comply with.
Okay. Need a motion to accept the contract, an additional $7,500 for the audit.
I'll make that motion.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
That was Mr. Moore,
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Second contract, resolution to approve the purchase of a bucket for the tractor at the Conklinville Dam. Mr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up to Conklinville right now, we have a tractor up there
and the only attachment on it is, well, there's two attachments. There's either a York rake or a brush hog. There's no front end loader on it. So anytime we need to use a piece of equipment up there, it needs a front end loader, we have to pull equipment from our Mayfield office, truck it up to Conklinville, let him use it for whatever work we're doing up there, snow removal, moving dirt, or moving rocks. So I lose one of my staff members down there to haul the equipment up, and I lose a piece of equipment at Mayfield. So by getting this bucket for the tractor up there, there's a lot more work that Eric can do up there without pulling from the other offices and staff. So that's our, we should have had one a long time ago.
And if I read this right, we're looking at a cost of $5,589.
Correct.
There's a low bid.
Yep.
Okay.
Motion for the
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
second?
I'll second it.
Mr.
Any
Vice
further discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Where's it get stored up there? Is there a,
Oh, there's a, he keeps it right in the garage.
okay,
Yep.
a Conway though?
Yep.
Because I missed that building.
Right now, we
Down
got,
around on
it's off to the right, as you
Okay.
pull down in there, the dam's over on the left, and then there's the garage.
the, okay, now I
Okay, need a resolution to extend the Albany rent agreement. Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, page 33 is my memo. The resolution is on 34, and the proposed sixth amendment to the lease is on 35 through 37. To refresh the board's memory, we got away from the long-term 3 to 5 year contracts 2 years ago, and we elected to go with 1 year contracts. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember why we did that. I think one thought was that if we had to get out of the contract, it was an easier way to get out of it. But at this point, doing annual rent contracts at a place I think we're probably going to be at for a while probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'd recommend we do a 2 year contract, and that's what this resolution proposes. The 2 years would take us commencing March 1, 2006, ending February 28, 2018. The initial increase would be from $31,725 to $32,312, which is about 1.9%. Then it would go from that $32,312 to $32,900. Also about a 1.9% increase. They have pointed out forever that we don't pay anything for the common area. Don't really know what that means, but
Do you use it?
I walk
Go
through
on.
the common area.
Go
but
on,
it's-
always.
Is it landlord in receivership?
I believe so, yes, still.
They had a tenant that was a dry cleaner who's created a, I think it's a state Superfund site.
Say it's a receivership, something like that? The building? I didn't hear that. What was that?
I believe the landlord had a tenant who was a dry cleaner who ended up creating a state Superfund site,
Yes, sure.
or at least there's an ongoing cleanup going on.
It's a
I suspect
restaurant
that
now.
has something, yeah, they created a restaurant. I suspect that has something to do with why they're in receivership.
But the space is, I mean, the space is fine. It's nicely located just outside Albany, so I just don't see any reason why we would want to continue to just,
Parking's free.
parking is free, thank you.
now that we have a decent revenue stream, I think that's why we went to the 1 year.
That could have been, that's a good
Yeah, I was
point,
gonna say, I
right?
think
May
it
have
was
been
because we
another
didn't
thought
know
at the time.
whether we'd have
There
to
was
keep
so
it
much
open,
up in the
be able
air
to
at
keep
the
it
time.
open.
Yeah.
A motion to accept the contract?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Neto.
Mr. Neto. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we need a discussion of the contract to extend the, the contract to do,
We're on the GIS map.
yeah.
Ryan Biggs, Park Neighbors.
The webcasting services agreement.
Oh,
That's-
okay.
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Good.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
it
don't
was.
have
That's
that.
what I was
Webcasting it is.
Thank you.
Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Farrar. I, under separate cover, provided the board with a First Amendment to the Granicus service agreement that we've had in place since, I believe, June. Yes, June 16th, 2011. The current budget cycle has in it the additional $300 fee that this new encoder requires, and the $7,500, which is the software and the hardware. So from a budgetary standpoint, it's already approved. But the contract's expired, other than it has, upon expiration, it has 2 automatic 1-year renewals. I think we need to take that contract, include this new proposal that the board has already approved in the budget, which is the hardware and the additional $300 monthly fee. And also, I worked with the folks at Granicus. They wanted a term in perpetuity. We said that's not happening. So they agreed to accept a contract that takes us out to 2018 and then gives the board annual options over the next 5 years. At this point, we basically, as the board is aware, we do our own webcasting with that solution. That solution is still pretty much only within Granicus. Anybody else you use is going to want production cost and then the whole 9 yards. The state offers it, and I think their minimum webcasting charge would be something probably 2 times or 2.5 to 3 times what it costs us to do our own. We don't have to do ours live streaming, although there's a legislature passed, is it a revision to, is it a new executive order or a revision to the executive order that addresses the need for everybody to go live streaming?
I don't recall whether it's a revision or an
Yeah.
executive.
But it gives you an out, which is, for us to do that, for us to do live streaming, we'd have to commit to 1 or 2 locations.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Only way you could do it. If you tried to live stream everywhere you went, then you're talking about a production cost.
Wow.
And there's certainly nobody in-house that would be able to pull that off, and there would be a whole lot of legwork and to get that done for every meeting. I'll make sure that that's a viable out of that requirement to do live streaming, but right now, I think staying with Granicus is the best cost, and this new solution, which is basically, you're not going to see anything different other than the way that we set up is going to be more streamlined. We will not have to deal with, as we are dealing today, with a computer that's running, can't run Windows 7. There's no software incompatibility. Everything that we own will get upgraded as they need to upgrade it at no cost to us. So that's really what the resolution is.
Sounds good.
That and the term.
Any further questions? Or actually, we need a motion first. Motion to accept the, and it's,
To amend the Granicus webcast. I'll make the motion we amend the Granicus services.
Mr. Bergstresser,
second.
I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes.
Any further discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Finally, in the contracts, the contract for GIS mapping of the Black River area properties.
And this actually is a proposal that, and Mr. Fulton has dealt directly with Ryan Biggs, so I'll let him walk us through it. But just to preface Mr. Fulton's comments, this again, we talked as staff, and there was just no way that I felt comfortable. Certainly the chief engineer didn't feel comfortable. And the person who was actually going to do it clearly did not feel comfortable working within that new ArcGIS upgrade and giving the sensitivity and the time constraints around trying to get this thing, the Black River reapportionment, done by signed, sealed, and delivered, if you will, by June. I don't think there's any other alternative other than to go with an expert. So we had Ryan Biggs and Clark on contract. We had a sense they had GIS expertise. We reached out to them, and Fulton kind of took the lead in providing them what we really needed to be done.
Yeah, there's not much more to add other than that they're going to create that inventory using GIS, inventory of properties, and compile floodplain, road, ortho imagery into a set of GIS mappings for us with the related metadata so that we can pull the information off as we see fit for the reapportionment process.
We need the flood zone mapping for the
They're
reapportionment?
going to include
Well, that's a good-
FEMA floodplain.
Right, so,
Okay.
Mr. Burke, that's a good question. The alternatives for reapportionment, any way you look at it, if we're going to include the county and the state, or the municipality and the state,
Right. It'll be done.
Yeah, we thought that the best approach was the Hudson River approach, which was to look at those beneficiaries along the river, similar to the Hudson River. To do that, we got to go through the same process.
Well, it's a proven process. We already hacked that,
Correct.
cracked that nut in court.
So we thought that was clearly a prerequisite, and in terms of trying to meet the tight time schedule, we got to get that done now. I mean, we can't, I don't think we have time to go out and try to procure GIS services through a formal
No, I just-
procurement process. The board has the discretionary authority to go this way. They're an MWBE, so the board has clear discretion up to 200,000. So in that respect, we're
I was just curious
okay.
as to why we're doing the flood mapping, and I thought the reapportionment just involved the hydros and potential head.
Well, they'll be in there too.
Okay.
I have a question. When we agreed to remediate the Hawkinsville Dam, I thought we discussed possibly including certain properties as beneficiaries in the future reapportionment.
Along the Hawkinsville.
Yeah. On the Black River. You know, I thought that we had discussed that in the past.
I recall a discussion. I don't think we made any decision. I think,
And I don't recall one way or the other if we were going to include them or not.
right. I mean, again, you look at the sum total of,
It certainly can be included, just as the others, if the board would like to include all of those properties in
we could,
our, in the staff's effort of reapportionment.
The question is, does it fall within the area identified?
would it, right. and
Right
that
now,
sounds
right now, the areas included as shown on that map exclude the area downstream of Hawkinsville.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
down to the confluence of the Moose.
Oh, it's funny, I'm looking at this map, and just for informational, I see this Forest Port Reservoir that's on the Black River, but it's not one that we administer.
Not one of ours, no.
Is it the Canal Corporation? They have jurisdiction?
Forest Port, and the Forest Port is I'm not sure who it is, but it's private
Private or municipal?
hydro developer, yeah.
Okay, I just,
So if we were to include Hawkins,
Included in our original
Rob,
Black River plan.
if we were to include Hawkinsville, is that, I mean,
In terms of the change in cost,
yeah.
given that additional, probably,
Glasses on Tony, but
I would guess that Ryan Biggs might ask for probably another $2,000.
what is the boundary? Yeah, gotta come this way, at least to the.
That's just based on the incremental between the initial proposal and the one that's presented to the board today.
Right.
Based on our inclusion of some additional river mileage that was excluded as compared to the first one. So yeah, I would say probably 2,000 probably would cover it.
So if the board wants to include that, it'll be additional cost. We're guessing at what that might be, but then we would have to ask the board
To amend it.
to authorize us to
Well, we can
negotiate
authorize-
something north
We can
of the...
authorize this amendment,
This.
and then with an amendment at the next meeting to include them.
Look into
So,
expanding it.
so the board authorizes us to go to contract for something that does not exceed the 21 and change, and then we reach out to them and see what they're going to need.
That's what I think.
It might behoove us to have the board authorize something a little bit more,
Well, that's
be able to move forward with the work,
right.
get it
'cause
all
that would-
done by March 1st.
Correct.
Rather than wait until March 1st, because if we have to do additional work, then it'll put us behind the schedule that we're trying to make in terms of the rest of the apportionment process.
Does
And
that
if it's also slightly above that, if for some reason we run into any difficulty, since we already have basically a general services contract with them,
Right.
that'll allow, if with the board's authorization, it'll allow the staff to move above the 21 to that ceiling that the board set for this work. Should we come into complications or need to spend a little bit more time, or have Ryan Biggs spend a little bit more time in completing the work.
I assume the mapping they're gonna do is what's in the blue, red, and green highlighted areas.
Correct.
Yeah, we're gonna focus on those, the actual parcel maps that we're starting with will include all of the counties through which the rivers run. But the focus will be on those properties right along the river. In terms of collection of the parcel data, the metadata, they will focus on just those.
I'm inclined, since we're the proud owner of that Hawkinsville dam, to include it.
You know,
Well, I think that Tony brought up a good point about including it.
Right.
Right.
If Hawkinsville is in Boonesville,
Boonville, yeah.
Out of Boonville.
Boonville, and Boonville is in Oneida County,
Correct.
I believe so.
which means we add Oneida County to the data that they were otherwise going to collect from Herkimer, Jefferson, Lewis, and the city of Watertown, and adds Oneida as another
Whatever.
potential county if we end up,
And that means what?
Well, it just spreads.
it spreads the cost a little bit further, but it brings in another county
Okay.
as a beneficiary.
Right.
If we were going to be sued by 3, now we're going to be sued by 4. If we're going to be sued by 4, now we're going to be sued by 5. Just
Yeah.
minor additional complication.
I think it's a valid point. However, the beneficiaries are the people associated with the Hawkinsville Dam. This board has agreed to invest, what, $1 million?
I don't know what it is.
Or whatever it's been to rehabilitate that dam.
They ought to be
It doesn't
paying.
make any sense to me to not include them.
Right.
No,
But what is the extent of that inclusion?
Well, and
You
that-
go upstream from Hawkinsville toward Forestport, let's say, just for,
Well, you're
Hey.
going to move downstream.
Just downstream.
Yeah,
It's
from
going
the
to be
dam.
downstream. Forestport is upstream of Hawkinsville.
Yeah, so just downstream.
So it'll be the section of the Black River between Hawkinsville and, what is it, Lions Falls.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lewis County line, which is a tiny area, and they won't have a big portion of any apportionment,
right. I mean,
but they'll have some.
right.
They'll get a bill for $45, and what the hell is this? And
however, if that dam wasn't there,
right,
and the conversations around the idea that the dam wasn't there and the impact on the property values adjacent to the river where it's being held back, then,
Yeah.
you know.
the impact of including it is much greater on Lewis County than Oneida County. I'm just saying there's now going to be another entity, just so you're aware. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. I think we should do it.
And in terms of, back to the,
So in your mind, the beneficiaries are included those who lies downstream from the dam?
Yeah, that's what we argued on the Hudson River side.
correct.
Yeah.
Nice recreational
How about the
benefit.
recreation stuff? people upstream, they're the greatest
Well, we
proponents of
considered that.
remediation.
That's another argument.
It was not included, but
No.
We didn't include the recreational benefits on the Hudson River side as a separate issue. We probably would do the same thing on the Black River
Well, I
side.
think
It'd be,
Make a motion
it's an
to
enumerated
add-
benefit, not set out separately as a line item. But basically, the beneficiaries of the dam, the beneficiaries of the regulation of the river are those entities downstream of the dam. Those entities upstream of the dam are impacted by the regulation, whereas those downstream are benefited by the regulation. Doesn't really hold true for boating.
Well,
But
we're remediating the dam, we've discussed it here at the meeting. So I make a motion.
Well,
Oh, go
just,
ahead.
it's just from the procurement side, if we're contemplating including Hawkinsville, if we increase the, this is going to be a not to exceed.
I was gonna set a not to exceed at 25,000.
Right, so it's a not to exceed of 25, they're gonna have to, and as they've been, one of the things in here that I certainly agree with in terms of their
I mean,
proposal,
estimate
it's gonna be
2,000.
by the hour. They're
Right.
gonna be charging us hours, we're gonna know what they're charging us, so I think 25 is something that is certainly something we can negotiate with them.
We have a second to that motion?
Second.
So it's a not to
Not to
exceed
exceed 25,000.
25K.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Burke first, Moore second.
We will move to the staff and committee reports. General Counsel, Mr. Leslie.
Erie Boulevard and Borlex have both appealed FERC's November 19th order through the federal appellate courts. They chose the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. The Attorney General has filed a motion to intervene on the regulating district's behalf in the proceeding against FERC. So they're in. Off we go. We're still waiting for a draft of the comprehensive settlement agreement from Niagara Mohawk. We expect that to be consistent with the terms of the executed term sheet, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Any questions, comments? Thank you, sir. Compliance Officer, Mr. Zicki.
Thank you. My report can be found on page 39. I will highlight a few items. Our third quarter utilization report was submitted and accepted by ESD. Our MWBE spend was $80,231, which gave us a third quarter of 37.1%, so a very strong quarter. Year to date, we're at 26.9%. Our MWBE goal plan update was submitted. As a reminder, the contract status sheets are included in your board tech pack each month. They're there to satisfy the Public Authority Law Section 2879. They're for your review. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. A new compliance issue is the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Business Act. That falls under Article 17B of the Executive Law. That requirement will begin April 1st. 6% of our spending will now have to be through a certified service-disabled veteran-owned business. I continue to work with our acting executive director on our website update. It's the initial outline of what it looks like when they have a beta site available. They'll send that to us. Hopefully in the next month or two we'll have a new website to look at. If you have any questions, I'll answer those. If not, that completes my report.
Very good. Any questions, comments?
No.
Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Ferrara.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on page 43, the summary report, and my report ends somewhere around 88. So pull that page. Because the meeting was not the second Tuesday of the week, financials weren't closed for January at the time that the report was written, so those balance estimates are fairly in line with what I believe the final numbers came in at. 2 million, almost 8 in the Hudson River area, and $1.4 million at the Black River. So there's cash flow reports that basically support that number. Financial, again, I believe the appropriation reports are through the end of the year, the end of this past year, 12/31/15. We seem to be pretty much in line as we are, Jennifer, 6 months through, well, actually 7, but these reports 6 months through. We look like we're pretty much online in terms of budget expenditures. In terms of assessments received, we, as the board is aware, we've received the $2.5 million and change from Erie. We did receive the Rensselaer County assessment for $542,447, so that's off the books as a receivable. We received also the Saratoga balance at $115. The only thing that was left was the Boralex past due assessments for the headwater benefit, $372,967. We just received a check the other day for 1/4 of that, $93,000 and change. As I've been communicating back and forth with the accounting folks, no legal, not operational, they intimated that they were not going to be able to pay the whole $372. I said, yeah, that's fine, but the invoice is for the entire amount. There's nothing that I see in any of these FERC orders that says that Boralex can just pay 25%. But so we received that check. I believe their thought is they're going to pay us quarterly to cover that. I would like to resend an invoice back to Boralex indicating the receipt of the 25% and immediately request the balance due plus the statutory interest, if the board
Yes.
Yeah.
thinks that's okay. I think they probably won't pay us anyway, but
You don't want to send a check back and ask for the...
no. Well, that thought,
I could do either. I haven't seen the check. I don't know whether they paid it under protest or not.
there was
At this
nothing but the
point-
check.
I mean, it's 5% for the first month and 3% for every month thereafter. It's pretty steep.
Right.
And they're involved in litigation with us before the courts. So,
And at a minimum, maybe, they want to pay us quarterly, better include that interest too. So, but I'm going to ask for the whole nut and plus the interest. And as each month goes by, we'll submit the next interest payment.
Invoice them again.
So, all in all, in terms of receivables, looking pretty good.
so by motion, the board's
Right.
willing to go forward with that?
Put
I
the
make that motion.
Second.
invoicing?
Rick to
Yeah,
invoice.
for me to invoice plus the statutory interest.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Any further discussion on that?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
You have some board expenses?
Just one other
I'm
new
sorry.
thing. The permit database, if the board isn't aware of this, is sitting in Access. It's been in an Access database, and Rob, since
2002.
2002. And it's worked. We haven't had any major issues. There's some concern about who's a record, if it's saved, and can someone change the record. The data in here is not, we're not talking about payroll, so I don't die over that aspect of it. But now we're having an issue with, we've had so many new versions of Access over the years. We're now up to 2013. A lot of people are using 10. It seemed like when we used 2010, some of the data and some of the, more importantly, the macros that drive some of the things that Access database does for us don't seem to be working now. I think it's time that we look at a more viable platform, if you will, to sit that permit system on. I think it's long outlived access. Probably the time we put it on, it probably needed to be on something different, but, you know, it is what it is. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna meet with an MWBE software developer, just to give us a sense for what it might take to do, and again, the data's pretty straightforward, but there's no social security numbers, and not that this database won't be locked down, secured, but I'd like someone to look at it and give us a sense on what's out there, just in that regard, and they will do it for nothing. And the only promise they'll get from us is that if anything they tell us sounds interesting, we might consider them to do the developing. So get a little free information on what other database might be more viable than the one we're currently on. So we start that, and maybe we get something going in the next year or so, and we can put that access database issue to rest, because it's a pain.
Sounds good.
Page 88.
Have a look.
Board expenses are on page 88 in the total of $752.22, which are expenses for Mr. Neto and Mr.
You
Moore.
want them done separately?
Generally, when we approve, it's board member expenses, so we generally just do them in one shot because it's on one expense report.
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Mr.
second it.
Hayes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any other questions or comments for Mr. Farrar? Chief Engineer?
Thank you. My report starts on page 89. Since my written report through the month of January, all the reservoirs, been able to make releases as we needed to bring them back to or slightly below our targets, but in any event, where we need to be, I believe, in preparation for spring refilling. Great Sacandago Lake is within inches of the offer settlement target elevation. Indian Lake is slightly below our historic average and slightly above what we use as a target elevation, but again, given the anywhere from 40 to 60% of typical snowpack and water content, I think pretty well positioned. Obviously, there's still opportunity for us to accumulate all the snow that we normally would have if we had snow from the middle of November, and it could come all at once toward the end of the year, which end of the water year, if you will, with it ending on refilling. But and that does make for some challenging operations, obviously. So that they're all poised for refilling in what would be a typical winter and snowpack, and I think that's again the safest bet to be in. We're actually starting to see, with these warmer temperatures, Six Lake inflow starting to increase. A little bit like a midwinter thaw, but there's not an awful lot there to run off either. So it's
The more there than there is.
puts us in a position of wondering whether we actually need to store that water, which we are as a result of just the smaller releases that have been set up to maintain the elevation now that it's been drawn down to our target elevation. Because we release that water and we don't get the snow in the next couple of months, we'll wish we had it. So it's a bit of a balancing act, obviously, this time of year when we don't have
Always,
snow
always.
and we're not sure. Generally, I think Weather Service is calling for warmer temperatures throughout the next few months and an equal chance of having historic average precip. So the likelihood that we might get liquid precip or continue to get liquid precip is a little bit higher. And that means we might need to start storing some of that rather than letting it pass through. So,
Yep.
any questions on operation? I'd be glad to take those. Otherwise, if there were two memos included, I'm not exactly sure which order they were in. One memo, first memo, addresses the Indian Lake engineering assessment. And we had, I can remember back in August 2009, the DEC directed dam owners to complete an engineering assessment. December 2013, the board conditionally awarded work to Bergman Associates for the Indian Lake and first engineering assessment. And Bergman has very competently and efficiently completed its review and inspection, field investigations, hazard classification review, and developed the engineering assessment, reviewing both physical, structural, and hydraulic adequacy of Indian Lake's facilities. I did attach the text portion, which was only about 10 or 12 pages. This is the full report here. I didn't attach that.
Thank you for not putting it in the.
There are some noted issues of concern within the report. They're very obvious toward the end of the text in the conclusion section. The most notable of those are some stability and sliding issues related to what we're referring to as the auxiliary spillway. It's generally non-overflow structure. It's the large monolith stone dam structure for the purposes of meeting the DEC's requirements for the engineering assessment. Moving forward, that structure will be considered an auxiliary spillway, can function as such, and to overcome that stability and sliding deficiency, Bergman has recommended rock anchors. And the other area, structural area that is of concern, is hydraulic capacity of the entire project to pass the design flood safely. We do have an abandoned log sluiceway that Bergman believes if we rehabilitate, that will allow the project to satisfy DEC's requirement with regard to hydraulic capacity. So that's also a recommendation that they made. And then some of the ongoing maintenance recommendations include the leakage in that stone dam and the auxiliary spillway, which we've been addressing over the years, which they have also included as a recommendation to continue. I could certainly answer any questions if you had any specific questions on that, but we're going to now submit that report to the DEC so we can comply with safety regulations.
And with these flaws, the dam is still safe.
Yes, I mean, it just, right, it has, I mean, one thing, we were talking about extreme event situations, and as in the case with most very old structures like this one, which is over 110, 115 years old, the regulations are much more stringent and require an awful lot more of their structures than when they were originally designed. And they're also, in particular, these are extreme cases. The design floods are on the order of probable maximum flood events. So,
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Hodges.
I still have one.
Oh,
one
I'm
other,
sorry. Excuse
I
me.
have one
apologize.
other memo that I included also regarding the Stillwater Reservoir and a need for an additional stability analysis. Back in 2010, the board hired Paul C. Rizzo Engineering to complete a liquefaction and deformation analysis for our north embankment at Stillwater. We completed that. FERC accepted that report, Rizzo's report, and their conclusions regarding the north embankment, that it had adequate factors of safety under post-seismic loading conditions. But during our 7th Part 12 independent consultant inspection in the presence of FERC this past December, FERC informed the regulating district that we should pursue a similar analysis of the South Embankment Dam. And so a slope stability analysis and under seismic loading has been requested by FERC for that embankment. And we seek authorization to request a proposal from Paul C. Rizzo Engineering to complete that slope stability analysis. They clearly are the most recently familiar with the structures and the facility. And so just looking for a motion, I guess. From
Do we
the
need a
board
motion or just
Motion.
a recommendation?
asking for that proposal.
It just needs authorization to look for.
Correct.
Yeah.
Motion.
I'll make a motion. Go ahead.
Permit- Need a motion to that effect, please? To,
Robert?
I move. Authorize.
I'll second that.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Alice, is there anything else?
I believe that is it. Thank you.
I apologize.
No.
Chief Administrator, John?
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Hodgins?
My report starts on page 163. Presently, we've received and processed approximately 2,300 access permit renewals. The riprap shoreline repair is not continuing. We have ceased that operation because of weather conditions. Probably start it back up if it stays like this. I attended an EAP yearly training with the Hudson River and Black River areas. And myself and the acting executive director met with Mr. Mike Poland on a resolution conference with an encroachment issue on Sacandaga Lake. Did you want to say something, Rick?
Well, no, it just reminded me that Mr. Poulin, with regard to Kunkel, has not responded back. Kunkel's these stone steps.
Right.
And I told him, because he said he wanted to meet on the 8th. We since then determined we couldn't meet on the 8th, had to be the 1st. I've gotten back to him about the 1st. He's not responded back, but I'm assuming that over the month of February he'll get back to us, so the board can expect a permit appeal on March 1st. I'm sorry, guys.
Thank you. And then probably about 3 weeks ago, we got a report over the weekend of a major ground disturbance in the Mayfield area. We responded to it on Monday morning. There was a bulldozer and a large excavator down on the state property. We're moving lake bottom, if you will, and pushing it up to the 771 mark in that area or higher up, trying to create a deeper water. This area, it's over an acre of property that was disturbed.
He wasn't looking for precious metals, was he?
No.
No,
There was 4 permits involved. 3 of them
Different
had
dredger.
ground disturbance. The 4th permit area, they dumped a lot of the soils into a wetlands area. So APA's involved, DEC's involved, all the agencies have been notified, including SHPO and Army Corps of Engineers. DEC's handling the investigation.
Good.
Right now, what the lieutenant has said, that they, a couple of the infractions, a failure to have a discharge plan, fill on state lands, and wetlands violation. The kicker to this is probably 2014, thank you, Stephanie. The permittees involved submitted a work permit to dredge this area to make it deeper for their boats and docks, and we denied it. So a few weekends ago, they tried to do it on a weekend and improve. So we're expecting a report from DEC by the end of this week on the remediation, what's going to take place, and any fines or anything like that. So I'll update you more at the next meeting on what took place and any recommendations that staff may have to going forward.
To include what we might want to do with their collective permits.
We need to set an example out there. People just
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
get away.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, it was friends of his that had equipment.
Even better.
So I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
Oh,
Thank you. Board member questions and comments, just, you were contacted by the paper. They would like us to do a column.
Correct, the
They're allowing us to do an informational column every month. Fulton County
Right,
Express.
Fulton County Express.
We want to come up with a name for the column. Anybody have any ideas? Nobody liked mine. I thought it was terrific, but my name for the column was Your Damn Business, and just have information. But if anybody who has any ideas, let us know, and we're going to try to do that monthly. I was contacted by the people on the permit system. We talked about setting up that committee, and they are interested in doing that.
With regard to the commercial insurance.
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
And the,
So we'll be moving forward on that. Those are the only two comments I've got. I need a resolution for the next board meeting, March 1st, I
First.
believe.
Right, should be
Back here at this
first, correct.
location.
yes. And it'll be back here. Mr. Hayes.
Second,
I'll second it.
Mr. Bergstrom.
all in favor?
Aye.
Now I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel issues and union contract, and I anticipate absolutely no vote coming out of
No business.
no business coming out of that meeting.
Make that one. Mr. Hayes. Mr. Neto.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are in executive session.